Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Venturing Abroad. My name is Eric. I'm a part of the communications team here at Daphni. I'm joined today by my colleague Chris, one of our investors. How are you feeling today?
Feeling good.
Love to hear it. And today we are going transatlantic. We're going to be diving into the differences and intersections between French and American entrepreneurship and tech ecosystems. Our guest today is quite the expert in this topic, so let's give him a warm welcome. Patrice Thiry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm also an LP in Daphni.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. And we're definitely going to talk about this a little bit later in our conversation. Patrice is a French entrepreneur who founded the startup ProwebCE in the year 2000, which he later sold for 300 million euros in 2017. And since then, he founded Tomcat Factory, a startup accelerator and investment firm. And on top of all of this, he is also the author of The Journey of a Successful Entrepreneur, the great story of a huge collective success. In this book, Patrice shares in depth his personal journey and the decisions that he took that led him to become the entrepreneur and investor that he is today. It's available in both French and in English. But prior to all of this, Patrice, you also spent many years living and working in the United States. So we're eager and excited to listen and learn from your experiences and international perspective. To dive in, I want to take it back to somewhat the beginning. You were born and raised in France, and it was when you were 17 years old that you decided to move across the Atlantic. Your journey in the United States begins at Babson College, where you decided to pursue your bachelor's degree. What drew you to want to study in the U.S.?
Well, it's actually very interesting because I just came back from Babson.
Oh, no way.
So I came back from my son's graduation.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So I was at Babson, like you said. I entered Babson when I was 17. So I graduated 32 years ago. And I was so fortunate and blessed to go back for my son's graduation just a few weeks ago. And next year, I'm going back again for my daughter's graduation.
Wow. Babson pride.
Yeah, Babson, they call it Babson Legacy. So, of course, it was a great experience, great fun.
Of course, there was no influence from the dad.
Nah, yeah, no, maybe it's bad. Maybe it's bad. I don't know. I'll see. I asked them, will you do the same with your kids? We'll see. So basically, to come back to why, I was always attracted since a very young age by the U.S. For a few reasons. Number one, I guess, is, the history of my family. I'm the only one in the family born in Paris, actually outside of Paris, called Maison Lafitte in the Yvelines. But all my parents is coming from the east of France. And so since I was born, I was told into this storytelling of how, the Americans helped free France and free my grandfather from German prison. And so there's this kind of, like I say, storytelling, but also a great gratitude, and reconnaissance for what young Americans did, to help France get out of this situation, and all of Europe and all of the world. So that's where it all started, I guess, this love of the U.S. The number two thing that I really attracted me to the U.S. is sports. Competition. I love,
It's the place to be, yeah.
It's the place to be. And I've always been attracted by, of course, NFL, NBA, but basically, sports, competitive environments, I've always found that really exciting, really stimulating. And in France, since I was 10 years old, I was in a swim team, so competitive. And so when I joined Babson, of course, the coach came into the dorm room almost as soon as I checked in. And he said, "Oh, you're that French guy, who does the 100 freestyle in 53 seconds. Why don't you join the swim team, And me, in my mind, I had suffered so much in high school, going 2 hours every night swimming, when my friends were going to the coffee shop in Saint-Germain-en-Laye after school, and in the weekends, going to swim meets when my friends were having fun also, partying. So, in my mind, college was, competitive sports is finished. I'll just try to have fun, once in my life. And the guy, of course, American, he was so persuasive. And like after 2 minutes in the dorm room, I said, "Oh, okay, I'm coming. I'm joining." So, I joined the varsity team at Babson. And there again, I discovered a whole different level of competition and a whole different level, of coaching, and a whole different level of dedication. I mean, I think, my whole body hurt so much. Everything was so pushed to the limits that, it brought me to a whole different level, which really helped me a lot in the later stages of my life. So how did I get there? Well, basically, I was in high school in a lycée in Saint-Germain-en-Laye called Marcel Roby. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
The international school?
Yeah, international. Kind of. We were in the international section of
Okay.
Marcel Roby. So it's not quite the Lycée International. And I was there with, I made a really good friend of mine, French-American, called Charlie. We were together since 9th grade. And the two of us had a dream to go study in the U.S. For the reasons more or less that I mentioned. And we go to this conference or this fair in the International School of Paris. And so we go there, and my eye, first thing, internet websites did not exist. And that was 1988, by the way. You were not born, huh, guys? So there was no internet, so we could not prepare for this meeting. So we just go there, and we see some guys behind tables with brochures of the universities. And my eyes, I see the School for Entrepreneurs. And then I look up, and I see Babson College, because Babson was unknown back then, So I don't know, that's the way I am. But right away, I saw that word, and I said, okay, that's where I'm going.
And then when you arrived there, I think I also had a bit of the same experience, but you didn't have a soft landing. You were just like 17-year-old, fresh new world, new country, new language, everything, new culture. And it was back then, no internet, no FaceTime. So how was the experience? And
Yeah, very weird. I mean, I know we cannot imagine nowadays, my kids cannot imagine. I cannot imagine a connection like this with my kids, of course, even though I lived it personally. But yeah, I get there. Well, before I get there, of course, when you're in U.S. college, they send you like your godfather, like in the summer before. So I had received a letter in Maison Lafitte, at my parents' house, to my name from Babson, saying, okay, your godfather is Cyril, a French guy, and you can contact him at this phone number, because there was no email address, nothing. So I called him up. He was based in Bordeaux, or next to Bordeaux, Cognac. I called him up, and I talked to his mom and said, oh, yeah, okay, good, yeah, let me pass you on Cyril. So that was like July, August. So we talk. He was a sophomore. He was entering sophomore. And so, I asked him, oh, okay, so how do we do? When I get to the airport, can you pick me up? Or he says, sure, yeah, okay, no problem, I'll pick you up. But I didn't have a picture of him. There was no TikTok account, nothing. I didn't have a picture of him. I didn't have his phone. So, I land at Logan Airport, 17 years old. I step out, I get my luggage, I step out, and I don't remember how we recognize he must have put a sign, I don't know. But, so I find him. Super nice, of course, super extremely, adventure. It's like a real adventure. Even though now it's so easy, that was an adventure. And so I get into his car. I was so impressed. He had a nice Jeep Cherokee. We put some loud music on. And Babson is about 20 minutes from Logan, so we drive. Beautiful drive, Mass Pike. We get to the campus, which I'd never seen. I'd never seen before the campus, just on the brochure. Again, you have to imagine, no website, no, nothing. So the only pictures I had was from this brochure where there was probably 3 pictures of the campus. And so, so he helps me meet, the RA, resident advisor. I check into my dorm room. I'm with two guys, in like like a 10 square meter room. There's 3 showers for the whole floor. 20 guys. We have an immediate party that night. Cyril introduces me to people. Great fun. And then all I remember is waking up the next morning in a room that wasn't my room. I fell asleep. Jet lag.
Proper college experience.
Yes. And then of course you're taken right into the American experience. Which is, they know how to onboard. Onboarding. The word onboarding exists. In Europe. Probably thanks to tech. In the last 10 years. Back in 1989, in a U.S. college, you were onboarded. Really onboarded. So we had 1 week of orientation week in the main auditorium. And of course, the campus is fabulous, so beautiful, amazing. Red bricks, and the greens. And so we get this 1 week onboarding with like speakers, on every situation. We had an ex-alcoholic, who came to talk to us about the danger of alcohol. We had an ex-drug addict. We had somebody who had AIDS. It was just the beginning of AIDS, who came to talk about this. We had entrepreneurs, of course. We had a magician. We had a hypnotist.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I had the same thing.
So we had like games to do. We had dances to do, and then after 1 week, we were all connected basically, and we not all knew each other well because we were 400 back then in the class. Now the class is 800, and then when it starts like this, obviously it's a key learning lesson in all of your life, because that if you onboard somebody properly, the experience is going to be vastly different. And I use that concept. I know we'll talk about the learning experiences and the learning takeaways, but of course, this process of making somebody welcomed and feel good and introduce, and make the person, relaxed is the most amazing thing, you can offer to a human being. And of course, when you offer this to a human being, he or she will perform actually much better. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, and especially in a situation like that when you're adventuring and you're in a very vulnerable state, right? So you're expecting the worst, and then I think there's a huge level of loyalty that comes from being well onboarded as well.
And you're right. And I think one of the reasons also, because Americans are so smart, one of the reasons they do this is because then they know that they can get some money back.
There's no free lunch yet.
Yeah, but it's smart. It's win-win.
How do you feel that the experience of studying in the U.S. shaped you as an entrepreneur later on?
Well, in many different ways. There's so many, but the first one that comes to mind is communication. So, first, my first class was speech communication class. So, I had never, in French school, the speech communication is the poésie, the poem that you have to stand up in front of the class, standing up really straight, not moving.
Knee shaking.
Yeah, and just reciting, your poem, and then running back to your chair and, putting your head under the table. And hoping that the teacher, will not say that, this was so bad and here's an F. So I get to this speech communication class, and of course, I learn how to speak, how to express, emotions, ideas, visions, stories, whatever. The second thing I learned, which is becoming like a hot topic, in the last few years in Europe, is diversity. I was in Terminal C, like I mentioned, which was back then the highest level of math and physics that you could get in a high school. In my class, there was one girl, and all the guys, were like 30 guys, and one was Thomas, one was Charles, one was Pierre, and
there's more Louise than girls.
Yeah. And so I get to Babson and I look around, in my first classes, I'm like, wow, Brazilians, all of every single country in South America, which I'd never been, never seen, Asians, Indians, Chinese, Japanese, all colors, race, religion, and a feeling that, all this is totally normal, and on the contrary, that it's a big chance, and a big opportunity for everybody, to share so much diversity. And in fact, Babson every year, had this international celebration day, where we all got to carry our flags, where we all got like booths, to talk about our culture. So, I learned how to expand, my thinking, my horizon to outside of, what was close to me. And it was very exciting, very liberating, very, it gave me a lot of, interest in the world. And that's why then I worked, for a company where I was head of international sales. That's where it came from. The next thing I learned was that you could have a horizontal relationships, with teachers, like in France, it's really, and sometimes it's good, of course, but, it's a very strict vertical relationship. In the US, I was amazed to see how kids, were talking to the teachers, and how they were talking in class, how they were almost, friends can befriend the teachers, or, very close relationships.
Yeah, it's like an exchange versus
Top down, yeah. So I very much like this horizontal relationship, and what that taught me is that, then as a future entrepreneur, of course, successful entrepreneurs are leaders. It's very rare to have an entrepreneur which doesn't have leadership skills, unless, of course, he's like this amazing techie guy, geek, who's developing his own thing on his side, and then he sells it to Apple for a fortune. But if you want to build, big company with lots of employees, a founder needs to have leadership skills. And I think this concept of having more horizontal relationships than vertical relationships, really helps you to develop, the foundations of some leadership skills, but also behavior. The next thing I learned is salesmanship. My parents didn't give me, they paid, my father had to get a bank loan to pay, it was, of course, U.S. school are very expensive, too expensive, ridiculously expensive. And so because my parents didn't give me any pocket money, I had to work on campus, and I was non-U.S. citizen, so the only place I could work was the campus, of course. And I decided to, I don't know how, but I saw, advertising in the cafeteria, on calling alumni, fundraising, from alumni fund collecting. And I thought this could be interesting, to practice my English and to practice my salesmanship skills. And that's what I did. So a couple nights a week, I was calling alumni. And I realized that is probably the top 3 learning experience I've ever had in my life. Because, you're 17 years old, there was no CRM. Yeah, CRM did not exist. So of course we're working on like big books, with the name of somebody, his phone number, and his class. That's all we had, 3 pieces of information. And so I realized that, first of all, salesmanship is all based on numbers. So, the more calls you make, the more opportunity you have to close a deal. And second, I learned, that if you become friends with someone, and that's why, so many French people will always say, yeah, Americans, they're so, superficial, because they think that they say hi to you in a smiley way, they think that they want to sell you something. But in a way, who cares, I mean, life is short. I much prefer somebody who's going to be nice to me. And if I end up doing something with him, great. If I don't end up doing something with him, it doesn't matter.
It was a nice interaction.
Yeah, nice interaction. I can go home at night, and if I try to remember before to sleep, did I have more nice interactions than people, looking at me with, bad faces or angry faces or jealous faces, that doesn't make you feel good. I realized that, and basically now you have this famous scene, from The Wolf of Wall Street, sell me this pen. So I realized, at 17, that if you ask questions to someone, if you try to understand what that person, likes, then you can probably get a connection. And if you get a connection, then, you can succeed, better. So, I realized after maybe a couple hours, all I had to do was understand, what they liked at Babson, what they were doing at Babson, and then talk to them about how it is today, if they were swimmers, then I knew it was perfect. That, hey, I'm in the swim team. This is what we do. This is the swim meet we did. Yeah, we're going next week. Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I used to love, going to New York University, for swim meets, and then my conversion ratio, became huge. So yeah, I learned many more things, but in a nutshell,
The Wolf of Saint-Germain-en-Laye.
yes, and Wellesley, Boston.
Right. And after you studied at Babson, you moved to New York, you started working, and pretty early on in your career, as you mentioned, you were at a director level doing international sales for Russell Athletics. This is pretty common to see in the US, a young 20-year-old at this high position in a company. We don't really see this a lot in France. Do you think it's something that France should start embracing and base it more on merit than on age in school? What's your take on this?
For sure, but we don't have the same background. We don't have the same history, the same culture, the same education. Another things that you'll learn a lot in the U.S. is risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
Americans are risk takers, and that's why they're so successful. And in a relationship and in a hiring process, in Europe, on the contrary, we're looking to de-risk. So we want to make sure, we hire the person that fits perfectly every single case, where in the U.S. they're much more based on intuition, and they're much more based on motivation level, and on giving a chance to really somebody who seems, to have this extra level of motivation. So the way it was basically is I walked into this interview. I was doing an internship, thanks to my dad actually, who found me an internship, because as a French national, I didn't get a job. I didn't get a job offer in the U.S. All the companies interviewing on campus offered me jobs in France or London, but I wanted to stay in the U.S. So thanks to my dad, I got an internship in Chicago in a clothing company, and I was there 3 months. And then I had this idea of starting this company to do sourcing, which was very new back then. That was 1992. Back then, the China sourcing was just beginning. Shenzhen was very small; it was just starting, and that's when I had the idea to start my company by offering sourcing services, at 20 years old, to U.S. clothing companies, apparel makers. And so I had found this company called Russell Athletic, who was selling like $1 billion a year of T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, because they had the license rights for all the NFL teams, all the NBA teams,
wow. Okay.
all the MLB teams since 1902. So they were basically providing the clothing for the franchises. And then in returns, they had the right to sell them worldwide in U.S. campuses, everything. So I said, wow, and of course, the T-shirts, and they were being manufactured.
And they were beautiful, the old school NFL
they were
Russell jerseys.
Because they were manufactured in Alabama. So Russell had 25,000 factory workers. They had the cotton fields. They had a fully integrated, since 1902, fully integrated production in Alabama. Manufacturing T-shirts and sweatshirts. And so I went to see the head of international business, John, which I found. I don't remember how I found his name, but he was in the Empire State Building. And so I go up the Empire State Building, I ring on the door. I talk to a secretary. I say, hey, I have a great idea, to sell your boss, can I see him? And, American style. And maybe the guy's name was John Frechette, Quebec, American from French origin. Maybe, I was, I took a little bit of my French accent. Yeah, Patrice, you heard me. He said, hey, man, come in. Okay, come in. So I talked to him. I explained to him, my concept. After 10 minutes, the guy looks at me and he said, how much do you want to work for me? So it wasn't a job interview, huh? I came to sell him something at 20 years old. So I was like, wow, I cannot believe this. I am living the American dream right now.
Yeah, that's the textbook definition of it.
Yes. I was like, I've been stressing. I've been looking for a job for 1 year in the US. I'm doing this internship. I'm living in 9 square meter, studio in Chicago. And now I have this guy who's asking me how much, do I want to work for him, for this big US company. So, I gave him the number. He said, yeah, sure, okay, handshake, let's start now. So then I said, no, okay, this is America. So I have to show him that I'm much more ambitious, because that's the other thing that America taught me. America taught me how to be more ambitious, which we don't teach in France. In France, we
and sometimes it's looked down.
Looked down, yeah. You have to not have your head up, So I learned that in the US. So I said, no, if I tell him yes, the guy is going to think I'm not ambitious. He's going to think he might change his mind. So I tell him, well, I need to think, because, I'm doing this great internship. They're going to offer me a job. They told me, when I go back, they'll make me an offer. Plus I have this idea of business, I'm not sure. So he said, okay, fine. I can give me another number. What's the number that, if I say yes, you will join now? And you will sign your employment contract now. So then I doubled the number, which was already very high, which was already the double of exit salary outside of Babson. Huh? So I doubled it again, and then he said, sorry, that's higher than my authorization, so I have to call you back. I said, fuck. So I said, then I'm thinking, because you have to think real quick, huh? So then I'm thinking, maybe he's doing this to see if I'm going to back down. Maybe he's bluffing. So I said, okay, fine. You can call me back, no problem. And he said, okay, bye. I said, shit. So I'm leaving. And then I'm back in Chicago. I don't remember how long, but a few weeks later, he calls me back. And he said, oh, by the way, okay, I got the approval. When can you start? Okay, sure. Let me talk to my maître de stage, and I'll get back to you. And then I joined the company, I don't know, a couple of weeks later. And so, and then I stayed 5 years in that company. I was in charge first of European sales and marketing, which was a big choice for me because, of course, I was trained American style. I was in the Empire State Office for about 6 months. I was like huge management training. I was sent to Alabama. I was sent to South Carolina, where they had also factories. I was sent all over, the place to meet, there was like 20,000 employees in the company. I met the president of the company, whose name was John Adams, which is very funny, one of the founding fathers. And then after 6 months, they deported me back to London. So I opened the London office. And from there, I set up the European sales and marketing operation. And then after 2 years, because I went really fast, but of course it was so easy. I was selling Dallas Cowboys t-shirts and New York Yankees hats. And then they gave me also Asia operation for sales and marketing. And so I stayed another 3 years. And then I left 1999 when the internet started to go live. And when my, appetite to be an entrepreneur, well, the appetite came back, but it's just that I saw that the opportunity was open.
And how different was it to sell Dallas Cowboys hats and internet products?
Totally different, much harder. That's when I realized that I wasn't a good salesman. I was good at selling easy stuff, but I was really bad at selling hard stuff. So I had to go through a whole other learning curve and learning experience.
What was your approach in terms of adapting culturally when you're working in Asia, in Latin America? How did you go about that?
Well, one of the things that I like to think and say is that being a French Americanized is a great mix. And the French part is great, of course. The American part is great as well, and for totally different reasons. And so the combination makes it great. And so, in a way, you don't have to adapt when you're French Americanized because you fit everywhere. And like everywhere I've been, in Asia, in all of Europe, when I was introduced as this French guy called Patrick, because I changed my name, Patrick, PXT, Patrick Xavier Thiry. First of all, it seemed like they liked me immediately because of the French part, the French culture. Most of the world, you go with a French, passport and a French culture, people will like you because of our way of life, because of our country, etc. But most of the time, those people, they will say, yeah, okay, yeah, we love the French country, but the French sometimes, they're a bit uptight. So we like them, but not so long. But then when they saw that I was Americanized, and that I was much more laid back, much more cool, much more open, much more business oriented also, and not wasting time. Like, sometimes it can happen with Europeans. It became the best of both worlds. And I developed immediate great relationships because I was like a ET, they were used to seeing French, they were used to seeing Americans, and there were things that they loved in the French, but things that really pissed them off in the French. And there were things that they loved in Americans and things that really pissed them off in Americans. But when they saw me, it seemed like they had the best of both worlds. So it was so easy for me. It was like 5 years, easiest of my life. I was welcomed everywhere. I developed great relationship everywhere. I was selling the easiest product in the world. So it was like I don't know, nonsense. It was so easy.
And then maybe as we move on towards kind of the next step and that borns then your entrepreneurial philosophy and experience, I think it's something that's very nice. It's to understand when you're working for a big corporation, sometimes we can drop the the humility and think that the success that's happening is because of us. And a lot of it is, but a lot of it that's being the success that's being built before us. Yeah. How was the experience and the learnings from moving from a large global brand into then starting your own stuff?
Well, it was hell. I went from heaven to hell. Heaven to hell for a few reasons. First, because I left, like you said, a large corp where everything was prepared for me. Everything was great. Everything was kind of easy. I left the international scene, where again, being French Americanized gave me such an edge to coming back to France, where I was seen like this American. It was the opposite in France. I was seen like this French who became American, who became arrogant, who became loud. Why is this guy? Why should we work with this guy? So thank God, I entered into the tech business, which tech business, of course, is more associated to U.S. U.S. culture. But still, no, it was super hard. I had 5 years of hell, nonstop hell. Nothing worked. And of course, it was the internet, the beginning of the internet. So, we had to find developers because I'm not a tech guy, I'm a business school guy. So I had to find the tech team. That took years. Then I had to find, then we had to wait for the technology, to deliver, the actual connectivity, because you don't know, you probably never experienced that, but in 2000 we were in 56 kilobit, so to get a website, to appear. It could take 1 minute to 2 minutes for a page. It was appearing line by line. It was crashing. Nobody wanted to pay. Nobody had a trust in giving, in putting their credit card and paying, on the internet. So the only thing that the first product that kind of worked, back in those time 2000 was really travel. Travel websites started to work, but me, my initial idea was to do clothing, but let's skip that. I pivoted to doing the first, HR information system in France, And of course, back then, when you talked about software, first of all, the word SaaS did not exist. SaaS did not exist. Software kind of existed. There was Oracle, there was SAP, it's a big SaaS. But they were fairly new. Oracle is 1984, 5. So, it was 15 years later. So the acceptance level of SaaS was fairly new. And back then they were not SaaS because they were not internet. It was like a CD-ROM, that you had to install on your computer. So it was locally installed. So and the words digitalization did not exist. In companies, the fact of using software to save time, to generate productivity, these were not issues for companies back then. That really started 2005 really to pick up. So I was a bit too early, 2000. So I wasted 5 years, to evangelize, to find the right tech team, the right product team. And of course, there was very little money because nowadays there's an oversupply of VCs. So there's, now there's an inversion of ratios. Not enough entrepreneurs, too many VCs. Back then, there were 3 VCs. Not many entrepreneurs too. And so there was no money. So I was virtually bankrupt, for 5 years. I was lucky enough to make a lot of money at Russell, which I had saved. But I burned through that money, in the first 2 years. Then I raised a little bit of money, friends and family, and so I was virtually bankrupt. So now when I have young entrepreneurs, who get scared, when they have like a 2 years runway, I tell them, listen, for the first 5 years of my startup, I was negative 2 weeks runway. So I don't understand what you're afraid of. So 5 years, really, really rough. I honestly don't know how I survived and why I continued. I think, a lot is based on, like you said, it's based on a lot of what the stuff you did before, of course. So, a lot, the swimming, being 2 hours a day in the water, that shows you, that gives you, teaches you resilience, Babson, Russell, all that risk taking, all of that stuff. So I think, that's some of the reasons that allow you to suffer a bit longer. And now, when I talk to entrepreneurs, the first interview I do with them, I'm trying to understand their level of suffering, how far, how long they can suffer. And I see when I question them about this, I see that most of them don't understand why I ask them those questions. Actually, almost all of them don't understand. Sometimes they look at me and say, well, who is this guy? Why is he asking me questions like that? And then I know, immediately that these guys will give up very quickly. I know these guys will never go all the way until the breakthrough happens. Because it's very rare. Not many people are ready to suffer 5 years.
You need to be with the right product at the right time, and that rarely happens. So that means that before that, you need to be just finding ways to survive, right? And it's not everyone that can find ways to survive.
And it seems like you kind of embrace the anything is possible, si se puede, American mentality when building your business. And
Correct. That's the other thing that you can learn, and if you embrace it, then it's beautiful. But again, it's not for everybody, But if you really learn that everything's possible, and make it, a life journey, Personally, that's what I love. And now what I tell the young entrepreneurs, I say, listen, I will never feel so much recognition and so much pride of how I felt, during those first 5 years, because after it became easy, and it became easier and easier every year. Year 6 became kind of easy. Year 7, a little more easy. Year 8, easier. Year 9, easy. Year 10, super easy. And year 10 to 15, super, super, super easy, while we were growing like crazy, So I tell them, but it's not made for everyone. And that's what I try to explain to young entrepreneurs, because, nowadays everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody, but, back in my days, I was the only guy at Babson. At Babson, I wasn't the only guy, but I went to a SEC in France, exchange program. In the class, I was the only guy raising my hand saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. But nowadays, you probably have 40% of the class who wants to be an entrepreneur. But being an entrepreneur is not made for everybody. It's made for very few, So I tell them, don't try, don't do it, unless you're 100% sure that you love to suffer. Yeah? If you don't love to suffer, forget it. Or just do it, but don't raise money from people or, who have worked hard, for their money, while in your heart, in your mind, that you will give up, So think it through first, and if you're ready to suffer for 5 years, then okay, but sign it,
What was the driver for you to then decide to come back? Did you feel that you had an edge? Was it the connection and you didn't want to succeed and create a new story of success in France? What was the decision to then come back and be an entrepreneur?
It's a combination of all this. There's also one, also personal, of course, family. You're kind of stuck with your family. Number 2, like you mentioned, the edge. I felt like it was if I developed a company in the U.S., I would be fighting against giants. If I start my company in France, I have a huge edge, and it proved to be right. The third issue is I was already back in Europe, because Russell sent me back to London, and so for me to get back to the U.S. with no visa, nothing, it would have been really hard. Back then, there was no investor visa, there was nothing. So I was kind of stuck. So I didn't even have the opportunity to think, let's start this in the U.S. So and it ended up being, a good decision. So
before we get to our final sort of rapid fire questions, we were curious to know, given your international perspective, how do you perceive Daphni? What do you think we're doing well? How can we improve?
So I've been LP since the first fund.
Yes.
Which was when?
2016.
2016, yes.
Almost 10 years. No, I think you have some on the edges you have is that you're very non-classic, pure finance VC type, Most VCs, most venture capital funds are run by pure financial, numbers guys, zero entrepreneurship experience. And basically they're just playing roulette, with money, and collecting 2% in the middle. So it's a nice roulette game.
No one sees the 20.
So you've tried to make it more relaxed, more cool, more, I guess, American style, So I like that. I like, and that's why, the reasons I invested is that. Second, of course, is my connection to Pierre-Eric. The third is I like, of course, the thesis of trying to find. You were kind of impact before impact.
Yeah.
And I like people who are ahead of the curve. You cannot be too much ahead of the curve, because if you're too early, of course, there's no market. But I think, and in fact, I'd be interested to find out, but impact became, the thing maybe 2018, 19, So you were a couple of years ahead of the curve. So I liked that innovation in the thesis. So it's pretty much the three things. Then, of course, where I was disappointed, well, no, I was not by Daphne, actually. I was disappointed by the other funds that I invested in because I'm an LP in many French funds. But one of the reasons I became LP in those funds when I still had my company was to get exposed to co-investments. Because I love, I love, of course, now, and Tomcat now is an accelerator, so I love to give back, but also, really teach young entrepreneurs, how to generate success. And so I was very much interested in investing as an LP to be invited as a co-investor. And none of the other funds that I've invested in have invited me. When they invited me, usually it was for bad deals, which I hope, I was fortunate enough to do no-goes. But no, Daphne opened up much more at the beginning, now less. I have no more openings, but I guess I have no more openings. I don't know why, but let's say the last co-investment I did with Daphne was probably 5 years ago.
So I need to work on this.
Yeah, but now it's more not me. Now it's with Tomcat, because now I invest all my venture money is invested through Tomcat.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the feedback. One thing we like to do at the end of every episode is just ask a couple of fun questions which you've not been briefed on. When you were working in Manhattan, what was your go-to bagel order?
Bagel? What's bagel?
Bagel?
Oh, bagel.
Bagel order.
Actually, I wasn't a big bagel. There was Au Bon Pain in the ground floor of the Empire State Building, and I loved their tomato soup and the turkey BLT.
Awesome. So, as myself, you're also a big sports guy. So, what are the big U.S. teams you had, and do you still follow them?
Boston Celtics,
No,
of course.
I'm a Lakers fan, so you're breaking my heart here.
Yeah, it's two competitors. But who won the most championships? I think it's Celtics. But they're almost the same. I think
We're
they're 17.
There. We're very close, I think.
17, 18 each, I think.
Yeah.
I'm a Cavs fan, so not looking good.
Yeah,
we have one.
So Celtics, and then of course I love Tom Brady. I love this guy. I mean, I think he's one of the most amazing guy.
He shows greatness and excellence.
And kindness and coolness and
leadership
and relaxation and leadership. I mean, this guy. I mean, I don't know. He seems amazing. So yeah. So Brady and the Patriots.
In your book that you wrote, you mentioned that you traveled a lot to Japan. This is the country that is famous for starting karaoke. So what is your go-to karaoke song?
U2. I love U2. So I guess With or Without You.
Great choice.
Cannot go wrong with that one. Besides family and friends, what was the thing that you missed the most in France while you were away?
When I was in the States? Food.
Food?
I mean, I was living on campus, eating cafeteria food, which in France is not good. In the U.S., actually, in the U.S. it wasn't that bad.
Really?
But when I was coming back in France, yeah, I mean, that's the first thing out of the plane that I was hoping to get, some nice French food.
Awesome.
Well, Patrice, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This was really insightful and very interesting conversation. So we really appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
guys.